My daughter died on September 11th, and she was in Tower 2 of the World Trade Center. She was drop-dead gorgeous. She had incredible blue eyes, and she was 4 months pregnant.
Several floors were taken out, and there's more explosions right now. Hold on just a minute, we got an explosion inside.
George Bush used my daughter to kill. George Bush used my daughter to mobilize troops. Because nobody in this country dared speak about September 11th in an honest way, they shut up and gave him the power to go to war. And now they're shutting up again because they messed up. There were no weapons of mass destruction. There's no connection between Al-Qaeda and Iraq. So my daughter's death was used to perpetrate a war on innocent people. They have Saddam Hussein. They created a pocket of hate in the world for more bodies to die. The insurgency is not going to stop. He has empowered terrorists on my daughter's bones. My daughter's bones.
It's an illegal war in Iraq, and killing innocent people for an illegal war. You know, I joined to defend my country.
We don't want anyone else being put through this nightmare like we have.
I'm a traitor if I criticize my country? Give me a break. I'm a patriot for criticizing my country.
I don't want one bomb dropped. I don't want one civilian hurt as I was hurt in her name.
Not in our name. These 4 words unite a diverse group of Americans opposed to the war currently being waged in Iraq by the leaders of their country. Anonymous citizens or well-known intellectuals, artists or soldiers, politicians or people of faith, all are in opposition to the war since its beginning, a minority in an America grown war-hungry and deaf to censure. Three years after the start of combat, their voices are starting to be heard in a country just waking from a general anesthesia provoked by the shock of 9/11.
President Bush delivered a major speech on terrorism today. Mr. Bush said that the U.S. and its allies have disrupted what he called at least 10 serious al-Qaeda terrorist plots since September 11th, including 3 inside this country.
There's always a temptation in the middle of a long struggle to seek the quiet life, to escape the duties and problems of the world, and to hope the enemy grows weary of fanaticism and tired of murder. This would be a pleasant world, but it's not the world we live in.
In the middle, this flag was my great-grandmother's, and she had it in her home during World War II. When I had uncles serving in World War II, so I thought it was fitting to have my son's pictures around an American flag that means a lot to our family. Bryce was in Baghdad for 15 months. Brandon, he was in Tikrit for 1 year, and after being the sniper and the sharpshooter and hunting for Saddam loyalists, one of his jobs was guarding the oil pipelines in the northern part of Iraq. And Brent just recently returned from the Persian Gulf. They say that the main purpose for the surface ship was to protect the Iraqi oil offshore facilities, so it was strictly an oil-related job. We're no longer the peacekeepers of the world trying to make it a better place for all the citizens. All we're doing is being sent around the world bullying smaller countries and taking over their natural resources like Iraq's oil. So any country in the world, I could see why they would look at us and be kind of scared. Today is number 193, so soon I'll be having my 200th protest here in downtown Richmond at the federal courthouse. At the beginning, it was very hard. Virginia is a very conservative state, and I couldn't count how many times people shot me the finger and yelled at me and cussed at me, shook their fist at me. They called me a communist, and they called me a homosexual. I heard a lot of that. People just need to know that it's okay to speak out against the war, and you can still be a patriot and oppose the war and the administration.
Our ability to disagree and our inherent right to question our leaders and criticize their actions define who we are. To allow those rights to be taken away out of fear, to punish people for their beliefs, to limit access in the news media to differing opinions is to acknowledge our democracy's defeat.
Even in my own business, I had people come up and say, "Thanks for speaking out against the war." And you're like, why are you whispering? This is America. You have a right to say that to me. Why are you whispering? There's been a drumbeat for years. Don't speak out. Don't speak out.
I think now in America people are more afraid to speak out against the government than they are afraid of another terrorist attack. People have a sense that there's a lot to lose in saying everything.
Some people will look upon you as unpatriotic. The people at work, the people in your neighborhood. And so it is this intimidation, this social pressure that very often keeps people from speaking up. So long as they are listening only to the government, so long as they don't have alternative voices, so long as their information is limited, they will support whatever the government does. Because Americans grow up with the idea this is the greatest country in the world. You know, this is the best. We are number one. And we only do good things in the world. We may occasionally have a little problem, like slavery, you know, like Vietnam. But in general, we're okay. And so, yes, it's hard for Americans to accept the fact that we are looked upon by the rest of the world as a rogue power. We're looked upon as a group of mercenaries going into other countries for oil and for political reasons.
The media are the most powerful corporations on earth. More powerful than any bomb, than any missile. The Pentagon has deployed the media, and we have to take it back.
Mass education, mass recreation, mass perception management, mass entertainment, mass education, mass recreation.
Media presents Americans as a monolith, as a pro-war monolith. The fact is, it's not true. The anti-war movement in this country, or those who are opposed to the Iraqi invasion and occupation, are not a fringe minority. They're not a silent majority. They're the silenced majority, silenced by the corporate media.
What are you doing?
Does it seem to you, along with the anti-war protesters, there are simply people who seem to be seizing on an opportunity just to come out into the streets and simply maybe cause trouble?
Absolutely, Julie.
Bush is a terrorist! Bush is the biggest terrorist!
Yeah!
Baby, they're done.
Fuck yeah!
I'm just kidding.
Hey, put this stuff on the news! Come on, put some real criticism!
1, 2, 3, impeach Bush! Impeach Bush!
This war is going to increase the chance of terror!
Impeach Bush!
They sponsor pro-war rallies. They fire hosts and reporters who express anti-war points of view. They urge their hosts to go to the rallies. They forced out the South Carolina Broadcaster of the Year because she dared to express an anti-war point of view. It matters when they own so much. when that perspective becomes the perspective that people hear all over the country.
No American reporters stayed in Baghdad the first war. No American reporters stayed in Baghdad the second war. What did that show you? They didn't want to know the truth. I mean, they were part of a mission, and the mission was an American government mission, you know, to go to war.
It's often been said, if you don't have anything nice to say it on Iraqi state television. Well, that old chestnut was proven yet again this morning when veteran war correspondent Peter Arnett was relieved of his duties as a correspondent for NBC and MSNBC in the wake of comments he made during a weekend interview he gave on Iraqi state TV.
The first war plan has failed because of Iraqi resistance. Now they're trying to write another war plan. Now, NBC initially fully supported me. They put out a statement saying, you know, Arnett has every right to say this. He said nothing that we would challenge, and it's fine. But then the reaction, particularly led by Fox News and right-wing radio, was so dramatic, a whole wave of reaction, that within 24 hours, NBC said, you know, you can't report anymore. Matt, I want to begin by apologizing to the Today Show. I want to apologize to NBC, MSNBC, and National Geographic Explorer. And I want to apologize to the American people for clearly making a misjudgment over the weekend by giving an interview to Iraqi television.
So good luck to you, Peter.
Thank you, Matt.
And now let's turn. It's a difficult situation.
Yeah, I've known Peter for a very, very long time. It's tough.
So the American people getting enormous amount of disinformation, lies, deceptions from the Bush administration, had no alternative sources of information. So they were overwhelmingly for the war. What has happened since then is that more and more information has come through, one by one, knocking down the claims of the Bush administration.
I'm a proud member of Iraq Veterans Against the War. And as I stand here today, I'm angry. When I came home for my mid-tour leave, I had a layover in the Atlanta airport, and I was still in uniform. And a lot of people came up to me and wanted to thank me for what I was doing over there. And my question to them was that if they knew what I was doing over there, maybe they could explain it to me, because all of us had no clue what we were doing over there.
Socialist, Marxist-loving, America-hating swine!
Traitors! Traitors to our country, go home!
Freedom is our
Go home, traitors!
Good men died so you can protest here today! Who's your daddy? W. Bush won fair and square, guys. Get over it. Get over it. The majority voted for George W. Bush. Majority supports this government, and we support George W. Bush. Get over it.
Look at how fat you are now. Look at how fat you are, you fat fuck.
Come on over here. Come on over, big boy. Come on over. Come on over here.
This is patriotism to them. You know, this is what being an American is about, wrapping yourself in the flag and covering your ears and not wanting to hear about or know about what's really going on over there. That's how it's always been in this country. You know, you have people saying, we're going to go invade, you know, Iraq or, you know, Afghanistan. No, it's not we that are doing it. It's the people in the military. You know, and how cavalier people in this country are, and our government is with the people's lives in the military. You know, the idea that, oh, well, you join the military, you join to die. You know, that's your job, is to go somewhere and die. No, it isn't. My job is to defend the Constitution and the people of this country. And I certainly was not doing that in any way, shape, or form in Iraq. So, this was about 4 or 5 days before I left Iraq. The kid on my left was giving the Hitler salute to the camera, and then on my right, a kid is holding up a local newspaper about Abu Ghraib with the torture pictures inside of it. I don't blame them for having the kind of reaction that they did. I understand it. We went into a country and invaded it for no reason, which is, personally, in my opinion, that's not much different than what the Nazis did under Hitler. So, you know, I read a quote from a general who said that preemptive war is nothing new. Hitler invented it, you know, when he invaded Poland.
I'm not allowed to talk about what I've seen in Iraq. They make you sign this before you leave. If you don't sign it, you can't leave. I'm labeled as a deserter to my country, and you know, a lot of people have the same beliefs as me, but you know, do they stand by their beliefs so hard to make a decision like this? And I mean, there's only a few of us who came out in the open and made this decision. I didn't join to go fight an unjust war that by all means it's an illegal war in Iraq, and killing some people for an illegal war. You know, I joined to defend my country, and I was willing to kill or be killed for certain things, but not an illegal war. It's not what I signed up for.
Kentucky is a pretty conservative state. A lot of people from Kentucky go into the military. There's a large contingent of the Kentucky National Guard serving in Iraq, so people who are probably don't react too well to somebody taking this kind of a step.
I've already wasted 2 years of my life, and to think of going to prison for another year or 3 or more, I couldn't even imagine. I've already been through so much. If I go to jail for a couple years, you know, man, I wouldn't even be a person anymore. I'd just be like totally lost in the mind.
So you could go back, spend 1 year in jail, and this would be behind you.
I would refuse to be punished for my actions.
Yeah. Okay.
That's you? Yeah, right there. There's my military ID.
And Cliff Cornell are both U.S. soldiers who recently came to Canada seeking refuge because of their opposition to the war in Iraq. Daryl served 7 months in Iraq and received a Purple Heart before returning home to the United States. A resident of Kentucky, Daryl decided that he could no longer be part of the war in Iraq, so he decided to come to Canada.
My country's been attacked, and if they're sending me to go die and fight this war, there has to be a good reason. I start getting in combat situations, and there was a lot of combat, but there was a few situations that really, later on down the road, played out in my thinking, where the first situation, I'm in a vehicle, and my good buddy, he's on top of the vehicle, gets hit with a rocket-propelled grenade. And he falls down my lap, and you know, he just basically goes limp and falls in the vehicle, and he's spitting up blood. He's looking at me, and he's going, you know, Anderson, am I gonna die? I hadn't even fired my weapon in combat. I take it, I point at someone and I fire, but my weapon's unsafe. So I switch it to fire, I take aim again, and I look and I'm aiming, and it's a 14-year-old boy just running for his life, scared just like I am. But because of the procedures that the military's put me in, I'm supposed to kill this kid. I believe it's my human right to choose not to kill innocent people, no matter what I've signed up for. I guess I came back to the States and I started thinking about this, and no one could give me an answer. You know, there was no weapons of mass destruction. You know, and they say, we're bringing democracy to the people. And well, the democracy in the States, it's really not a democracy. It's ruled by money and power.
I deserted from the Army after refusing orders to Vietnam in early 1969. I spent 3 years in Sweden. I spent 3 years in Canada. And now here I am back in Canada with a whole new generation of war resistors. So for me, it's a very kind of bittersweet deja vu experience. It was very natural for me to gravitate towards this new generation of war resistor and try to lend a hand in terms of the experience I had. In Canada, we have 15, a small number, about 15 soldiers who have surfaced and have filed claims for refugee status. I imagine there are a fair number of AWOL soldiers spread around Europe right now, and I haven't heard of any of them applying for refugee status yet in France or Germany or other countries, but that could happen, and I hope if that does happen, that those countries will realize, well, instead of saying, well, they joined, will realize what? We have a responsibility under international law. This is an illegal war which we opposed. These young men and women have had the guts to say no to this illegal war, and they deserve a refuge, at least a temporary refuge, in our country.
GI Rights Hotline, this is Jackie. What? The drill instructor told him to go ahead and shoot himself? And he did. Oh, goodness. He witnessed a suicide. Oh, dear. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
The recruiter will talk about everything but war and the reality of war. So a lot of young people are absolutely shocked and traumatized when they find out what the truth of war is. And if they do not think that they have any other out, maybe before they've heard of the hotline, or they may have talked to a chaplain who said, well, stick it out, and they feel they have nowhere else to turn. They go to their commander, and their commander doesn't tell them that there's such a thing as conscientious objection. They feel they have nowhere to go, so they leave.
If his ID is run through the National Crime Computer, that felony warrant will show up. If that happens, he will be taken directly to jail. So being, extraordinarily careful during that time period is important. The military can't enter your home without your permission. So we do have those kinds of rights still. He can contact an organization called Iraqi Veterans Against the War. You're real welcome. Okay, take care. Okay, bye now. He saw a young man who wanted to get out and tried every way he could get out. He couldn't get out, so the guy jumped in front of his platoon and killed himself. He saw another young man who said he wanted to get out, and the sergeant said, well, just shoot yourself then. And he shot himself in the leg. Unbelievable. I mean, it's just so unbelievable what we hear. But he's home right now, so maybe he'll stay there. And I take a break.
We may never know how many AWOL soldiers there are. I would imagine that that is something that the military wouldn't want us to know. And that if they say that there's 5,000, there's probably double or triple that.
What will be crucial in this case in Iraq is when more and more soldiers in Iraq refuse to serve out their terms, refuse to go back to Iraq, more and more young people refuse to join the military, when families become more and more angry and march by the hundreds of thousands into Washington to demand an end to the war, and mothers, bringing the pictures of their, like as they did in Argentina, where mothers brought the photos of the disappeared, to show what had happened. I think when it reaches that point in the United States, then the government will have to withdraw.
On April 4th, 2004, my son Casey was killed in Iraq. He was only 24, and he died in his best friend's arms. Mr. President, you lied to us. And because of your lies, my son died. You said he died for a noble cause. What cause? Mr. President, I want to tell you face to face how much this hurts. I love my country, but how many more of our loved ones need to die in this senseless war? How many more soldiers have to die before we say enough? I know you can't bring Casey back, but it's time to admit mistakes and bring our troops home now.
This is the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
We turn now to the story of Cindy Sheehan. Sheehan is now in Crawford, Texas, taking part in a vigil near President Bush's vacation ranch. She has asked for a meeting with the president, but so far the White House has said no.
Talk to Cindy! Talk to Cindy! Talk to Cindy! Talk to Cindy! Talk to Cindy!
There was 15 of us down in Crawford, Texas, and that was our motivation. We wanted to see Mr. Bush, and obviously he would not meet with us, and that was our main motivation, to tell him what we've been through and how hard it's been for us, and that we don't want anyone else being put through this nightmare.
These are the names of our troops who have died since Camp Casey opened on August 6, 2005. Raheem J. Jeffcoat, age 25, died August 6, 2005. Kurt E. Kraut, age 43, killed August 6, 2005. Chase Johnson Comley, age 21, killed August 6, 2005.
This is about flesh and blood. This is what we're here for. We don't want to see any more of these coming home to their families. Have you ever heard the sound of taps played at your brother's grave? They say he died so the flag will continue to wave. But I believe he died because they had oil to save. Have you ever heard the sound of taps played at your brother's grave? Have you ever heard the sound of a nation being rocked to sleep? The leaders want to keep us numb so the pain won't be so deep. We will not be rocked to sleep anymore, and we will not let our leaders continue.
President Bush emerged from his ranch in Crawford, Texas, Thursday and addressed for the first time the rapidly growing anti-war protest outside his property.
I sympathize with Mrs. Sheehan. She feels strongly about her position, and she has every right in the world to say what she believes. This is America. She has a right to her position, and I thought long and hard about her position. I've heard her position from others, which is get out of Iraq now. And it would be a mistake for the security of this country.
I don't want his sympathy. I want answers.
Meanwhile, she's come under attack by right-wing websites and commentators. Earlier this week, Bill O'Reilly of Fox News suggested that Cindy Sheehan has committed treason.
I think Mrs. Sheehan bears some responsibility for this, and also for the responsibility of other American families who have lost sons and daughters in Iraq, who feel that this kind of behavior borders on treasonous.
Our country has been taken over by one party. We're under a virtual dictatorship right now, and the opposition, the so-called opposition party, is very weak, and we are trying to give them the courage to speak out. And the only thing that changed Camp Casey was the mainstream media found out about it, and Middle America found out about it.
As we begin this time of communal prayer, I'd like us just to begin with a moment of silence, remembering the over 2,000 American soldiers who have been killed up to this week in Iraq. According to the Iraqi body count website, over 30,000 Iraqi civilians have already been killed up to this point. And so we mourn with all of those whose families have been touched by this war in ways that can never be repaired. And we pray for those who are still over there. And we pray for our leaders that they would have wisdom in concluding this. So if we could just have a moment of silence.
The American government does a lot of things supposedly in God's name, and I don't know what God they're talking about, because God, as I understand it, is a God of love and justice and liberty, never of oppression and never of hatred or fear, and that's what's being sown in God's name. And my money and my name is being used to fund and to back this, and it stinks in my nose, and I cannot just roll over and say nothing.
In the same way he took the cup and said, "This is my blood poured out for you. As often as you do this."
There's a powerful right-wing force, religious right in this country, and they have made a powerful alliance with political elites, and they are they've married their agendas in ways that frighten me and offend me.
May peace fill your soul. Let peace keep you whole. Good job. How are you? I got Peter. I missed you.
Good morning.
Good to see you too.
We're going to continue our discussion of how we as Christians should look at war. How many of you think World War II was a just war? How many of you think Vietnam War was a just war? How many of you think the current Iraq War is a just war?
I don't think any war is just like you might see a good devil. If you're a devil already, how can you be good? I don't know.
On for peace, bring troops home. Thank you. On for peace, bring troops home.
Just wanted to say thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for your support.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Have a nice day.
On for peace, bring troops home. Thank you. Thank you. On for peace, bring troops home. On for peace, bring troops home. One day, I got so many honks out here that a lady came out of the building and asked if I would mind moving down the street because all the honks were making it hard for her to work. She said she understood about freedom of speech, and it was my right to stand down here, but would I occasionally stand someplace else because the honks were making it hard to work. So that was one of the proudest days of my life. It hasn't always been the great men that made the great changes. They can come from anywhere, and it's just we all need to keep our spirits up and work as hard as we can. And we have our eyes on the goal. We can't stop now, especially with the public opinion turning in our favor.
Dire predictions on Iraq. President Bush was playing to his strongest suit. A new CBS News poll finds approval for his handling of the war on terror at 46%. Way down from before, but better than Iraq, only 32% approve. The majority of Americans also now think U.S. troops should get out as soon as possible.
When do we want it? Now! What do we want?
Peace! Now! Peace! Now! Peace! Now! Peace! Bring the troops home now. 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 Bring the troops home now.
It harkens back to something I heard an admiral say in Vietnam. He was asked, how do we get the troops out? And he said, by boat. So now we can get them out by boat, by plane. Us moms can drive our minivans over there and pick the kids up. It's very simple. And I've had generals tell me that can be accomplished in 2 months. You know, and then you know what's going to happen when our military is out of Iraq? The insurgency is going to stop.
Thank you. Sure, I'm with my husband from Italy. Where? Quick, yes. Okay. I have to show you.
The people united will never be defeated. The people
hundreds of thousands. Our estimate was 300,000, but who knows? After a certain point, you stop counting, right? When hundreds of thousands of people marched past the White House, I think my sense of that was we saw a lot of people who were angry. We also saw a lot of people who were like proud to be able to stand in front of the White House and say, we disagree with you, and they were claiming that space.
Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you!
People who become morally outraged over a policy realize that the normal institutions, which are supposed to be the institutions of a democratic state, you know, voting for the president, writing to your congressman, appealing to the courts, that none of that works. None of that has an effect, that these institutions are not truly democratic institutions, not truly representative. And so people discover they must go outside the law. They must commit acts of civil disobedience.
Hi, I'm on my way to be arrested, so I probably won't be able to talk to you for a few hours. At the White House, we're going to tie ourselves to the fence.
That's not the power.
Right. We know.
They have the violence.
Yeah.
They have the domination.
Yeah.
We represent 60% of the people of this nation. We are the power.
I want to warn everyone that when you go over to the White House sidewalk, you will be risking arrest.
Without you, Cornell, everybody who's behind Cornell, take a step back.
Excuse me, you're in my way. Come on now. Watch out. Watch out.
Tell the truth about how many civilians have been slaughtered. Innocent civilians slaughtered. Why? For lies, for oil, for greed, for Halliburton. How long?
You want to get arrested, stay on the sidewalk.
Y'all need to move back. Y'all need to move back.
The whole world is watching.
The Bush administration has turned us into the greatest hypocrisy the world has ever seen.
Worst president ever.
Worst president ever. Worst president ever.
all getting arrested. It's supercharged here, brother. I wish you were here. This is happening.
Patriots! Patriots! Patriots!
Mr. Bush, face your people. Stop the arrest of innocent American civilians. Unbelievable. Women, children, have you no shame, Mr. Bush? Have you no shame?
I think it's a wake-up call. As Jefferson says, you know, the price of democracy is eternal vigilance. We cannot sleep on this, ever, ever. We cannot just roll over and assume that someone else is going to get it done. We cannot just lay back and expect someone else to do the heavy lifting. That's our job. And this does not just, I think we take for granted what's been given us and assume that it will stay there, and that's a false assumption. And that if we don't struggle for it in every generation, we're going to lose it. Many people in my generation don't vote. It's extraordinary how many people don't vote when people have died for that privilege. They take it so lightly, largely because they're apathetic. They think that it won't make a difference. They believe that they've been so disenfranchised as voters that it doesn't matter. And you have to convince people otherwise, which is hard to do when evidence on the ground seems to tell you something else. If the Supreme Court can decide who is the president.
Blood is the symbol of life. All life is holy. All people are created in the image and likeness of God. All people are family, and everyone is loved by God. Killing is wrong. Preparation for killings are wrong. The work done by the Pentagon with the connivance of the military recruiting station ends with the shedding of blood. And God tells us to turn away from it.
We went in to this Army and Marine recruiting center and we actually poured our own blood.
On the walls, on the cutouts, on the floor. And in my case, I stepped outside the door and poured it on the sidewalk in front of the door.
This is our blood, and we've poured it to show the blood of the innocent and the blood of life that is life-giving, the blood that is sacred.
I'd do it again twice. It was totally appropriate. That imagery was exactly what's happening. There's a lot of blood on that flag.
Putting the blood on the flag was to make that blood more visible. In my view, the United States is the #1 terrorist in the world. You know, we have invaded country after country after country. We have toppled governments in other countries. We have bombed other countries.
The St. Patrick's Four carried out their action March 2003 when they entered a recruiting center in suburban Ithaca. This is the first federal conspiracy case against anti-war activists since the Vietnam War.
I'm a traitor if I criticize my country? Give me a break. I'm a patriot for criticizing my country. In the finest tradition.
If that means going to jail, as being an activist, being a nonviolent activist, oftentimes means going to jail, that's the price I'm prepared to pay. And many of my friends are prepared to pay that price too.
Our feelings about today are that even from the first day of the trial, there's been a miscarriage of justice, and that the people who should be the defendants in this case are really people that aren't here, namely Mr. George Bush, the president, Dick Cheney, Ronald Rumsfeld, and Alberto Gonzales. They are the real criminals of this war.
It's the only trial that's going on in the country where people are facing conspiracy charges or any charges really for directly resisting the war. It's another opportunity not only to make a strong statement against the war, for people to take responsibility for resisting the war, but also to establish that we have the right and even the responsibility under international law to resist the criminal actions of our government. And that's what the St. Patrick's Four are doing, just as are the young war resistors who've gone to Canada or have gone AWOL or have gone to jail for refusing to go back to fight in Iraq.
Americans have the right and even the responsibility
to challenge the government if they feel the government is taking the wrong direction. That's a First Amendment right. That's the right of free speech. That's in our Constitution. That's fundamental not only to our government, but to France's and many countries throughout the world. So we need to stand up for our First Amendment rights, protect the right to protest, protect the right to challenge the government, both from outside and from inside.
Clearly, our testimony showed that, in fact, we are not violent people, and that is not our intention, nor would it ever be our intention in trying to change and convert the hearts and minds of the people of our country.
And while we're talking about violence, we know that the greatest violent crime is killing people. And right now, 100,000 Iraqi civilians' deaths are on our hands as a nation, and that's a crime we need to address. That's our work in this democracy. Right now, those crimes are so serious that we want to put our attention to it.
To deceive and mislead the United States Congress and the American people about the basis for taking the nation into war? Yes. Is it a high crime? Is it a high crime to manipulate intelligence so as to allege falsely a national security threat posed to the United States as a means of trying to justify a war against another nation based on preemptive purposes? Yes. Is it a high crime to commit a felony via the submission of an official report to the United States Congress falsifying the reasons for launching military action? Yes. And if the President of the United States has committed felonies, he should be held accountable. It is time to demand our country back. Thank you.
I think we also have to expect that the leaders of this nation accept the consequences for their unwise and perhaps even illegal activity in ordering an attack on a nation which did not attack us.
In the United States, there is domestic law. There's actually domestic criminal law that could hold a government official liable for committing a war crime. And the kind of grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions that have occurred in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Guantanamo, would create liability under these criminal statutes. It would take a courageous and extremely ethical prosecutor, federal prosecutor, to bring such a prosecution. And it would raise issues of immunity for the president while he's still in office. Once George Bush is out of office, it's not clear if anyone would ever do that in the United States, but certainly as he travels internationally, he has, as Commander-in-Chief, as President of the United States, he has ordered policies that could, under universal jurisdiction, make him vulnerable to an indictment in another country.
The Bush administration has been following a course which can only now be described as a series of crimes against humanity. And the destruction of life abroad is accompanied by the destruction of our liberties at home. We are in danger. And so precisely at that time in history, when people most need their freedom of speech, when constitutional rights are most required, exactly at that point are they crippled and destroyed, as is happening now with this administration, with its Patriot Act.
Increasingly, Americans are seeing their liberties being stripped away. And whether it's librarians defending the right for citizens to read whatever books they choose without those lists being taken by the Department of Homeland Security, or citizens having the right not to be monitored without their knowledge. These are very, very disturbing, and maybe individually they might not seem too disturbing and they may have good reasons for them, but when you take them as a collective, it's frightening. It's frightening to see the direction we're going, and it's being done, again, in the name of our safety.
Are we turning into a Soviet kind of society? Oh, look, Guantanamo's not a gulag. Well, you know, you explain to me the difference between those two.
Both in the United States and in, for example, some of the European countries, there is what I would describe as a trend or a shift towards tyranny because people are afraid and because of fear. And I think that historically there has been a swing between times when there has been much more openness and much more honoring of civil liberties and civil rights, and times when people are operating from fear and tend to allow tyranny to prevail.
Peace be unto you all. We must be willing to look the new Israel, that is the United States of America, and its leader, Uncle Sam, in the eyes and say, Sam. I got confused for a minute. Sam, you're wrong.
We are in one of the darkest moments in American history. That the occupant of the house that is not too far from here has engaged in abuse of democratic freedom and abuse by those who surround him in invoking the name of God in what I believe are abiblical and unrighteous aims. And I would
We have a major task in front of us to create the kind of movement that can speak really to the spiritual crisis, and if we do speak to that spiritual crisis, we can change America fundamentally.
It's not about Christian, it's not about Muslim, it's not about Buddhist, it's not about Jew, but it's about humanity, Lord. Your children have got together, so now we come together. We stand in the gap for these parents and these families, Lord.
In the same way that there are certain communist leaders that have given communism a bad name, we're witnessing a democratic leader giving democracy a bad name. The problem is that we have a misunderstanding of what power is. We don't realize that in a true democracy, if you have the power to put someone in a position of power, then you are more powerful than the person that you're putting in that position. So that we are looking up to God, to presidents, and not looking at ourselves. And so we're like, well, it's a bad thing that he's doing that. It's inevitable, you know, the shift in power. It's inevitable. It's inevitable that something like the Pledge of Resistance would be written and would resonate as loudly as it is, and will continue to do so until, you know, the truth prevails. It's inevitable.
Not in our name will you wage endless war. There can be no more deaths.
No more deaths, no more transfusions of blood for oil. Not in our name will you invade countries, bomb civilians,
kill more children, letting history take its course over the graves of the nameless. Not in our name will you erode the very freedoms you have claimed to fight for.
Not by our hands will we supply the weapons and funding for the annihilations of families on foreign soil. Not by our mouths will we let fear silence us.
Not by our hearts will we allow whole peoples or countries to be deemed evil. Not by our will,
not by our will, and not in our name.
We pledge resistance.
We pledge alliance with those who have undergone attack for voicing opposition to the war or for their religion or ethnicity. We pledge to make common cause with the people of the world to bring about justice, freedom, and peace. Another world is possible, and we pledge to make it real.
The people, united, will never be defeated. We support